So my name is John Baldwin, and I have been programming Python, or at least leading the team programming Python for the past year. I started a new job yesterday, so left the job that I was working at for the past 6.5 years. And so what my topic is on something that I've done a little bit both at work and at home. We needed to use an ORM for our database. It's a spatial database, basically has weather data for the continental United States. And we needed to go from a MySQL DB that was kind of hacked together to something a little bit more robust. And so one of the developers, I said, check out SQL Alchemy. I had started playing around with it. He looked at it. He didn't like its object models, but he at the mapping. But he looked at SQLsoup and says, "Hey, this is pretty cool. This is pretty easy to use." So I said, "Okay, give it a try. Check it out." He had to go on to do some other things, so I started playing around with SQLsoup on my own, and I found that it was really cool. SQLsoup, it does auto discovery. It works on top of SQL Alchemy, so it supports all the databases which SQL Alchemy supports. Main open source ones, MySQL, Postgres, SQLite. And so with that, going on to the next slide. So with using a SQLsoup is that it's it's pretty straightforward. Is that what you need to do is with SQL Alchemy, you create an engine, you define the database URL. This example has it as a SQLite for a file. You set the metadata for the engine. Let's see in here. Yep, metadata for the engine, metadata create all, and then define your soup object. As soup being an auto discovery tool, it creates your objects, your models for the table name, and then the attributes, the data members are the field names for the table. So, and it does auto determining of what those types are. So it generally is pretty good at figuring out that an integer is an int, strings to strings, but sometimes it will take a string if it thinks it's a number and convert it to an int. That happened with us with one of our primary keys. So it's a little gotcha that I haven't figured out yet. Working with it, what you see here is I want to get all my libraries. So I say soup libraries.all, and I get a list of libraries. I want to get a particular library. Well, I filter by, and what I just defined in here is in my representation, which I'll show in a couple slides down. Slug is my cookbooks.1. That guarantees I get one. Now I want to get a book that's in the library. So I then get a book. I say what the title is. I'm creating a book in the library, so I provide any necessary information I needed, and then say which library to put it in. Then I say, oops, I want to add a description to it, so I can add a description and then treat it just as a plain old data model. Then I commit. So it's a hybrid, plain old kind of data model plus what you would expect when working with like MySQL DB, a record management. So you insert things in like you would insert in records in a database, but when you pull them out, you can treat them as models. So going on, all right, but there's a problem, and the problem that I found here was when I wanted to write unit tests and use SQLsoup, because I'm trying to follow best practices of not touching the file system, not reading from a real database, not going over the network, so my unit tests can be very fast. So as I accumulate them, they'll still be performant, and I'll still want to keep running my unit tests instead of saying, maybe I'll just avoid it or whatnot. SQLite memory, when you instantiate it, going back up to the top here, SQLite memory, when you create the engine, there are no tables. So since SQLsoup is an auto discovery, there are no tables to discovery, and I was left scratching my head going, how am I going to write unit tests to this? So kind of going on, point out the questions here again. So for that, what you can do is you define in metadata. So scrolling down, so in the table metadata, so up above, a couple slides before where you saw the library tables and the books, and I also added in a page here. What you do is you basically define, import the schema, and then define your table and define your columns, each one. You don't need to use it because what happens is as you define it, it inserts it into the metadata. So what you do is you define these metadata, scrolling a little bit before, define these metadata, and then you can create all with the engine that will define your SQLite memory, and then instantiate your SQLsoup, and then you can start using your SQLsoup models like they were already predefined data models. So what I did here was I created a little project, and having this lightning talk gave me the impetus to actually get some code out onto GitHub. Kind of up on the wrap up, my little project is REST Notes. It's just kind of a sandbox project that I'm playing around with RESTful APIs and with the idea of kind of storing content with libraries and books and pages. And I plan on continuing to work on this, even though my new job I will be doing Ruby and Ruby on Rails during the day, so no booze please. So it's kind of like code Ruby by day, Python by night, because over the past year that I've really been getting into Python, I really love the language. It's a really cool language. I'm happy with it. And so with that, if I will just escape here, go up to the, oh great. Yep, all right, so. So let me go see if this will remember this. All right. There we go, okay, great. So just kind of digging through, so in here, go into test, so what I have is I've kind of set it up really basic. The package is here. So you go into REST Notes, you see that the database is here. The database basically goes through, does the definitions, go back up to the previous page here, going back up, and then for the tests is that I have a very simple test harness that really just goes into the test directory, calls it, and then going into tests is have my unit test, which goes instantiate, set up, and then just does a quick set of tests that I'm building on test library, test book, so we've got the individual tests, and that's about where I've got that. Thank you.